Welcome. Withholding tax in Oracle Cloud. In this video, I will talk about everything for withholding tax in Oracle Cloud. So what our agenda will be? I will give you some of information as introduction. Then I can show you the setup steps A to Z. Then show you actual example. Then we can check the reports. So let's start our video. What is withholding tax? This is the amount of a supplier payment that's withheld by the purchasing party and sent directly to the government as a partial payment of the tax owed by the supplier. So sometimes different parts of the world professional services rather than pay the supplier directly, the company, in this case the purchasing party, withholds an amount of tax referred to a withholding tax, and they pay that directly to the legal authority or the government authority rather than directly to the supplier. So this is the definition of withholding tax. Now, tax can be withheld either at the time of creating payable invoice or a payment. So you have the option to choose either at the level of the invoice or payment. And by setting withholding tax thresholds, you can set the minimum and the maximum allowed for withholding tax. The first key decision when thinking about setting up your withholding tax is to realize there are two ways that you can do this within your Oracle Cloud environment. You can set up withholding tax using payable setups, or you can use the tax engine for more complex tax requirements. In this video, I am going to show you how to configure withholding tax through tax engine, because we will create a rule, we will create the setup steps from A to Z. Also, I will give you some more complex requirements. So let's say that withhold depends on the person or product, then you can use full power of Oracle tax for these complex tax requirements. But the setup in Oracle Payables, there is no any complex requirement, you can do it there. Complex requirement as, for example, as a particular class, when you do all of your practices, you will see how to use it through Oracle tax to make a conditions depend on the party physical classification as your supplier, the bill from a specific country, and so on. This is the introduction. What is the setup steps in Oracle Cloud? First step, you have to create withholding tax supplier. As we said before, that after you withhold the tax amount, you are going to pay it to the government or a federal as a tax authority. So first step, you have to define tax supplier for withholding purposes. So let's get into application to show you how to define it. I am logging here to Oracle. To define the suppliers, the rules of the supplier manager, administrator, and the procurement must assign to your user to define the supplier. I already defined supplier before. Just click on procurement, suppliers. I will show you my supplier. WTH as withholding tax supplier. This is a normal process of define supplier, but to save your time, I define it. Just put here a supplier type is a tax authority. That's it. Everything after that is the same for sites, address, contacts, classifications. This is like a normal supplier, but just the difference is supplier type. Because during the setup of the tax, you will mention the tax authority or the authority as the supplier. So what you have to do, just put the supplier type tax authority. What the next step is create configuration owners withholding tax. So let's start by configurations of owners withholding tax. Again, come back to Oracle, go to setup and maintenance. In financial, you can search by configuration owner. Manage configuration owner tax options. You have to take care because once you log into any or you navigate to any of the setup of the tax, there are two types: transaction tax as a normal tax, sales tax, VAT, etc., and withholding tax. So for each step you have to be carefully to select the withholding tax. Just click on it and search or create. Again, to save your time, I already created before, so I will show you what I did for the setup. Just configuration application as payables, search. I can put it configurations equal my business unit. Search. Here, configuration owner is the event class. There are two event class, prepayment and standard invoice. What is application name? Payables. Entity name is purchase invoices. And what is the apply withholding? Are you going to apply withholding? Yes. Are you make transaction tax? Yes. Is it possible to allow manual withholding? Yes. Here, regime determination set withholding standard tax calculation codes and determine applicable withholding regime. I selected the second one because I'm going to create my complex or specific rules through tax engine, so I select determine applicable withholding regimes. After that, what is the calculation point? As I told you before, there are two types of calculation point, either invoice or payment. Then tax invoice creation at invoice. Here, what is the rounding at the header or line? So start date and end date, and this is enable. For example, if I need to create a new one, I just click not possible here. Okay, add. You can add it from here. Here, configuration owner, you can select your business unit. Here, as I told you before, prepayment, standard invoice. This is all of checkbox. What is the regime determination factor set? You can define the regime. either determine applicable or withholding standard tax classification code. Calculation point, invoice, payment or both, tax creation, invoice or payment, what is the rounding header outline, start and end date. So if you are going to define or set up withholding tax through tax engine, you have to select here determine applicable withholding regimes. Okay, let's come back to our slide. So this is the first step after creating the supplier as a tax authority. Create withholding tax regime. If you hear the setup steps here like a tax, a normal tax or a sales tax or a VAT tax, this is the same, but instead of select the transaction tax, you have to select withholding tax. Whatever the options in tax, you will see the same options in withholding tax. So let's go back to the Oracle to check the tax regime. Click done. Just search tax regime, manage tax regimes. Again, you have to be carefully to select withholding tax. What is the country? I define one withholding tax regime. Again, what is the code? What is the name? What is the country? This depends on your country. What is the start date of using this withholding tax regime? What is the tax currency? What is the rounding rule? Are you allowing tax rounding override or not? What is the rounding rule? Is the nearest or whatever? Then go to configuration options. Configuration options, you have of parts here. You can put for legal entity, you can put for business unit, you can put for ledger. So I put it for my business unit and the same ledger or a legal entity, sorry. So what is the configuration tax and rule? Common configuration here, I put it as a common configurations. If there was different business unit, they could potentially subscribe to this one regime. And this is the purpose of the common configurations. But the other options, you can select specific business unit or a specific common configuration without party override. Then enable and effective start date and end date. This is the withholding tax regime. It is the same as tax regime. Some of the options here, some of the configuration options also you can edit. I can disable checkbox, enable checkbox. I can change currency, change whatever. I can come here and add more party name, part type, country, configuration as a common or common with party override. I can end date for a specific or the current and create a new one. All of these options is enable. Just cancel. Yes. So let's go to the next step is creating withholding tax. The same with the VAT tax or sales tax. You define configuration owner, then you go to define tax regime, tax status, tax jurisdiction, tax rule, tax rate. The same step with withholding tax. So let's show you how to define or create withholding tax. Click done. The same here, manage tax. So again, I am going to search. Before that, be carefully to select withholding tax. Here I define one withholding tax. Again, what is the regime code? We already defined before and we will put it here. Global configuration is a specific business unit or legal entity or a global configuration owner. What is the tax name or a tax code? What is the tax name? The start date. The start date of all of the setup steps must be the same, on the same date. This you will not enable to allow or enable these options even after define all of the setup required for the tax. So this is the last step to enable tax for transaction through withholding tax. Again, what is the country, geography, what is your country, what is the currency, what is the tax minimum, what is the rounding rule, all of these options is it up to your business. Then again here allow override of calculation, allow entry, allow tax exceptions, exemptions. Again, this is depends on the requirement in your organizations. Then you can go to tax account to put what is the tax account. It's liability account. You can put it your here value set segment as liability. For example, it will be withholding tax, whatever the name of this account in your chart of accounts, and specific ledger and business unit. This is the tax account here. Tax authority. If you remember the first step, we started by defining the supplier as a tax authority. So here I put it our supplier as a tax authority. I defined the WTH underscore supplier, so you have to put it here because it's required to mention the tax authorities. So here, control and default, what is your count of withholding tax? If you have tax reporting code, I don't have. And what is the supplier or the government entity or government you are putting as collecting tax authority. This is withholding tax. If you can edit, again you can edit start date, you can edit rounding rule, tax minimum, accountable unit, allow override, allow entry of manual, all of these checkboxes. Here tax invoice creation point, again there are two options, invoice or payment. So let me cancel here. This is withholding tax. Come back. Create withholding tax status. The same steps in normal tax. Here you have to follow. Again, here search by tax status. For tax, you have to assign the tax administrator and the tax manager as rules to your user to allow you to create the taxes. Here, manage tax status. Again, be careful to select withholding tax because by mistakenly before I defined the transaction tax instead of withholding tax, and during try to check the result I didn't find any calculations. When I check back again the setup, I forget to select withholding tax and I defined it in transaction tax. Again, what is the country? Try to search. This is all of the regime. I stopped some of them. This is the last one which is applicable now. Again, what is the tax regime code? Start date. Again, global configuration. What is the tax name, tax status code and name? And is it a default tax status or not? Because maybe you have a lot of tax status, so you have to select which one will be a default tax status. Again, option as a control and default, exceptions, exemption, allow tax rate override or not. This is the tax status. Click done, come back. Withholding tax jurisdiction, again, tax, the same here. Be carefully to select withholding tax, country, tax regime code, can put equal, example, just equal, search, this is our jurisdiction. Again, what is the name, what is the code, tax regime code, tax country, start date, and this is the tax rate we will define later. So how many rates are you going to using for withholding tax? This is the jurisdiction. Click done, come back. It's a normal as a sequence setup steps. You have to define each of them to enable the tax for transactions and also to allow you to set up the rules as a complex or a normal rule. Then create default rate. Once you create default rate, again come back to here. There are setup tax rate and recovery tax rate. Again selecting withholding tax, country, equal, tax regime, how many rate are you going to using with your withholding tax? I defined only 3% as a rate. As you see here again, what is the tax regime code? Is it global or for a specific business unit? Tax, status, jurisdiction, tax rate code, tax rate type as a percentage or amount, tax name, status, jurisdiction again, here how many the percentage. Here you can put for example 3%, so here it will be 3. You can define one more again for a rate 5, so you put here 5 and so on. But you have at least one rate as a set as a default rate and start date and end date. So this is the rate which we'll be using in during calculate the withholding tax and the invoice or payment level. So let's check. After you enable the rate, you can come back to the setup tax, done. Search for manage tax. Search by whatever you defined for the withholding tax. This is my withholding tax. And enable tax for transactions. So after you defined regime and tax, state, jurisdiction and rate, You can now enable your tax for transactions. So you can come here and edit and enable tax for transactions. So let's check what is the next. The next is creating withholding tax rule. For the creating withholding tax rule, there are a lot of setups to define your rules. First of all, it depends on the business requirement. So my rule is not like your rule, it's not like his rule, and so on. So you have to get or collect the requirement of the rules. After that, you will get into the application to try to apply these rules in the applications. In my what is the rule I'm going to create here, that I put specific rate, and I put also I will create a physical classification. This physical classification as a party, as a supplier. So by first of all, I will not enable this tax for all of the suppliers. So I will put it as a not applicable. Let me show you here. Tax rule default. For the tax rule default here for my withholding tax applicability not applicable. Not applicable means by creating any transactions, this withholding tax will not be applicable. So I am going now to create a one specific rule to make it applicable if the conditions is the same. For example, I will create one rule that if the physical classification is a bill from the supplier, specific supplier, and this specific supplier is already assigned to my withholding tax, so let the system applicable or calculate the withholding tax for this invoice which is related to these suppliers. For example, you can create depends on the product. If the product classification is specific, for example, car, for example, any other things, and this product at the invoice, so you are going to apply and calculate withholding tax amount. Different scenarios, you can make here tax applicability is applicable and go to create a rule to make exceptions or to exclude whatever will not be applicable for withholding tax calculation. So again, this is options up to your business requirement. Either you are going to make the tax is applicable for all and exclude some of them depends on the rules, or vice versa. Here I am going to make, as you see here, is a not applicable, but I will some one conditions. These conditions is there at the invoice level or supplier level, the system will calculate the withholding tax. So go to click done. Here, manage tax rule. We have done our foundation or basic withholding tax setup as a tax configuration owner, tax jurisdiction status, rate, enable, all of these. At the moment, the basic withholding tax setup tax, as you see there, is not applicable. So we are now going to build advanced rule that basically is going to be driven by a party physical classification. If our supplier has withholding tax classification, then this particular withholding tax will apply on my payable invoice lines. So we have got 7 steps to do this tax rule. So what is that steps? For that, manage classification category, create party physical classification, create withholding tax determining set, create withholding tax condition, create withholding tax rule. and reviewing tax calculations of the withholding. Again, these rules different from organization to organization, from a person to another person. But in my case, I will follow the same steps. So let's start by manage classification category. You can here try to manage classification. Manage classification categories as a customer. Again, I can search. Defined one as withholding standard 3. Can edit. Here, what is the classification category name? The meaning, the same, the descriptions. Here I put it table HZ parties. This is for the customers or suppliers parties. And classification code. What is the classification code? I created withholding standard 3. So if you remember that our rate, I define only one rate, and this rate percentage is 3. So again here for the classification category, I defined 3. So if you have more than one rate, I can define a lot of classification code meaning under the classification category. So this classification code, later we will put it in our conditions to tell the tax if you, for example, if this classification code assigned to supplier X, so you will calculate 30% of the amount as a withholding tax. If you define another rate for 5%, you will put it here as a classification code meaning as a 5. So, and assign this classification to the supplier level. So once any invoice is entered for these suppliers with 5%, the system will calculate immediately 5% amount as a withhold from the invoice amount as a withholding tax amount. So here, this is depends on your requirement. You will transform this requirement into rules. So again, I just define the one classification code because I defined only one rate with a 3%. All of this as a names, there is no list of values, there is nothing. Just you have to put table name HZ parties and create whatever you need as a classification code meaning. So this is classification category, and you already defined classification code. What is the party physical classification? Click save and close. Done. See. Energy party physical classification. Search. I will put it equal withholding standard 3. Search. These are the party classification code. That again, what is the type code, name, start date, and what is your regime. You already defined the regime before. What is the tax regime, start date, and physical classification code. This, whatever we defined before as a physical classification code, we just put it here in our party physical classification. Done. Done. What is the next? Tax determining set and tax condition. Let's determining factor set and then tax condition set. For the tax determining factor set, I will tell you now what is that. Again, there is one the T, factor set. The problem here, you have to select withholding tax. So here, again, take care or be carefully to selecting either withholding tax or the normal tax. You can search. Okay, I will put it doesn't equal this search. T. Just I log it out and log in again and tax determining factor set, select withholding tax. What is the tax regime? Search. I can come here to search. This is 3% search. Tax determining factor set. To build a rule, you have to define determine factor set. After determine factor set, you are going to define condition set. The both we will put it in the rule to let the system how or to tell the system when the system will calculate the tax. Again, what is the code, what is the name, what is the set usage as withholding tax rule, tax regime code you already defined and which specific ledger. In determine factor set, I put party physical classification because as you told you, I will create my rule depends on the supplier. So the party physical classification as a supplier, classification bill from these suppliers, determining factor name is standard 3. Because again, the rule is once the system check that this supplier is assigned with this determining factor set as withholding standard 3, the system automatically will withhold or create or calculate a 3% of the invoice amount as withholding tax amount. So to define a rule, you have to define determining factor sets and conditions, the next step. Before that, you can define party physical classifications, depends on your requirements, or to match or to transform your requirement into applications. Click on done. Done. After determine factor set, you are going to make a condition. Condition means applicable, not applicable, when the equations equal to, not equal to, more than, less than, and so on. Again, be carefully to select withholding tax. Just put it equal to tax condition set 3, search. In condition set, you will assign the determining factor set, which you already defined before. Again, what is the code name factor? This is the factor which we defined before. Is it enabled or not? Ledger country. Here, in the party physical classification to bill from this determining factor and equal to this withholding standard 3. What I mean that these are the conditions that bill from these suppliers and the tax determining factor name this equal to the same, because I defined it the same. So the system what will do, it will calculate the VAT. This is what we will see in the next step as a tax rule. So we just here define condition, determining factor set, and put our conditions. If you have a more than one equations or one conditions, you can create it for each of them tax factor, determining factor set, and the tax condition set. For example, if I have 5 rules, a different 5 rules, so I can create a different 5 determining factor sets, and with them the 5 tax condition sets, and in the rules I can put all of these condition set and determining factor sets in our rule. So to be clear with you, I will click create, done, and go to define tax rule. Manage tax rule. Again, manage tax rule. Again, be carefully to select withholding tax. Here there are a lot of place of supply, direct, blah blah blah, tax rule, tax registrations, and tax status. So what I will using here as a tax applicability rule only. So just click tax applicability, search, it will ask you the tax regime or configuration, search. There are 2. This is my rule. Why I select tax applicability? Because if you remember in the tax level I put it the tax rule and the default not applicable. So here I'm going to tell the systems when it will calculate the withholding tax. So I just click on tax applicable rule, and in this applicable rule you are going to put a rule code, rule name, start date, and mentions the tax condition set which you already defined before, and mentions the determining factor set also. If you see here, the system will ask you what is the tax conditions. You will select it from the list of value. This is the tax condition set, and what is the result? Result is either applicable or not applicable. Because in my case I put it as withholding tax setup as not applicable for all, so here I put one conditions to applicable. So if this condition is met, is system that found this condition is the same, for example supplier or invoice, the system will automatically create a withholding tax. In this case, that the values is withholding standard 3 is assigned to our party physical classification as a supplier, which is bill from, so the system will withhold 3% amount of the total of the invoice amount as a withholding tax. In a different cases, maybe in your organizations you are going to make a setup of the tax as applicable, but in some conditions you are going to make it as a not applicable. So there in the tax levels, as a tax rule and the default, you will put it as applicable. But here you again to define tax condition set and the factor sets with specific conditions, either the product, suppliers, the country. Also you can make any rules depends on your country. If this foreign currency, is this a foreign supplier, so don't calculate. If it's a local, so calculate, and so on. So you can make a book, create a condition set and factor sets depends on the country also. So in this case I will come here to make it as a result not applicable, because in general my tax is applicable for all, but here I'm going to make a create tax is not applicable for specific conditions. I hope now you got what the meaning of factor set and determining factor set is a sequence of the setups, but it depends what is your requirement, what is the conditions you are going to apply it in the tax. This is the normal withholding tax that I will create 3 or 4 rates. For these rates, if the system check that these suppliers assigned to this rate or this withholding determine factor name. So the system will calculate 3, 5, 5, and so on. So this is the normal or straightforward rule, depends on the rate. So let's come back to the, so this is the rules. Click done. What is the next step? Once you create withholding tax rules, you can reviewing withholding tax calculations. Now is the timing to reviewing withholding tax calculations. Before that, you are going to make updates of supplier and create invoice to check the results. Let's get into application. This is procurement, suppliers. You can search or select. I can click manage, search, for example, which is started by A. For example, art line. I just check the site is completely defined for our business unit, which is enabled for withholding tax. I make auto create assignment. This is a normal process. Save and close. Again, come back to the profile. Down for the transaction tax, there is one classification. This classification, you have to add your classifications. Here, the list of all of the classifications which is defined by you or standard, because I defined only this physical classification. If you remember, and the physical classification code is the same. Start date, I will put it from January. So once I assign here the classification, which I already defined, the system will make these suppliers or all invoices related to these suppliers is applicable for calculating withholding tax. Because in general, I put it my withholding tax is not applicable. But I only put one rule as applicable with this physical classification type code. So whatever suppliers is there assigned to this physical classification code, the system will calculate the VAT. Again, maybe you have defined 2 or 3, 4 rates, so you can define again determine factor sets and condition set for each rule or for each rate, and you can assign these classifications to whatever suppliers you want. That's it. Save and close. Let me take the name art 16935. Again, go to invoices to check the calculations. Go to payables, invoices, create invoice here, create. Again, select the business unit which is enabled for withholding tax. Select the suppliers which is assigned to the physical classifications. What is the number? I will put withholding tax 1. Amount I will put 4,000. Date payment term of this is as usual. The amount 4,000. What is the distribution combination? If you go to right, this is the normal tax, which is VAT or sales tax. I will put tax as exempt. Again, try to save. It's saved. Try to calculate tax. Okay, go to down. Again, still the total is due. Try to validate. Sometimes the tax or withholding tax calculated after save, sometimes after validate or calculate. If you go to down, you will find the total is 4,000. The due is 3880. So what is the difference? The difference is got or went to the withholding tax amount. So this is the withholding tax. Just save and close or make approval as submitted or force approval. Again, try to count in draft or post to ledger. You can view accounting. Here, item expense, liability as 120 for withholding tax, and liability again. So the net is deducted from the liability, it will go to tax authority. Now the amount here is 120. Finish? No. Because we said what? Because that we will create an invoice for what? For the tax authority. We defined before a supplier as a tax authority, right? And we said the purpose of the withholding tax to deduct some amount of the suppliers to pay it to the tax authority as a federal tax authority. So this amount as a 120 must be the system create another invoice for the withholding tax authority. So let's go to cancel, go to search for invoice number or supplier withholding tax. Supplier search. Here 120. This is invoice number because during set up the tax we put that the creation of the invoice will be at the invoice point, not payment point. You have invoice point, payment point, both point. In my setup I put it as invoice point. So once the system calculate in original supplier invoice amount, the system will take or create automatically invoice for the tax authority as a supplier tax authority with the deducted amount as a withholding amount. You can come here, edit and complete your invoice. This is invoice. You can update it, but this is generated automatically by the system. And here if you see withholding tax for the suppliers art line building managed, and you can here descriptions, everything, total due. So this is created automatically because we told the system to create withholding tax at the invoice point creation. I hope now you got what the withholding tax, what is the setup requirement or required, how to update the supplier, how to create the invoice, how the system will create the withholding tax automatically with the amount which is deducted from the original supplier invoice. Again, all of these steps is the same, only the rules. The rules depends on your condition or your requirement or your organization requirement. So try to focus on the rules and how to apply your rules in Oracle applications. If you like my content, try to share, try to subscribe. Thanks for watching.